Welcome to the Discover Uncover podcast series. We hope you come away with a deeper sense of Michigan's history and how the objects and stories of the past relate to today's culture, customs, and society. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the Discover Uncover podcast series.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Discover and Uncover podcast. I am one of your co-hosts. I'm Jerome Threlkeld, Community Engagement Coordinator here at Sloan Museum in the wonderful city of Flint. And I am joined by my trusted colleague today. Come on, tell them your name.
I'm Geoff Woodcox. I'm Curator of Collections here at Sloan, and we are really excited to talk about Faience Tiles today.
Faience Tiles. Now, before we get into these Faience Tiles, you missed out on one of your credentials.
And what's that?
You're the man.
I do get told that from time to time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's usually a basement dweller, but, he's getting out before we talk about these artifacts and share with our community and share with our listeners. And so we're just glad to have you out of the basement.
Well, the reason he's saying that is that's where we keep the collection, so that's also where I work. And it's kind of nice from time to time to get out.
Let's talk about that room. It's like temperature controlled and it's high tech. Let's talk a little bit about that before we get into Faience.
Absolutely. So, all the artifacts that we pull up here, a lot of them live in that room. It's about 10,000 square feet, climate controlled, completely humidity, temperature, everything else, so that we can preserve all of these materials for decades, centuries to come.
Yeah, well, that's really good to know. When I know I need to go to a place that's temperature controlled, I'll go to the collections. So we're going to be talking about Faience Tiles and its significance in Flint's history. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about it. Let's get into it today.
All right. Well, did you ever heard of Faience Tiles before working here?
I actually heard of Faience Tiles. When I worked for United Way, we had a lot of those Faience Tiles in a storage bin, and we actually ended up selling some of them for a fundraiser. Yeah, so I've heard a little bit about it, but I know that you have more to tell me about
I do. And I'm not surprised to hear that, one of your former employers, which is here in Flint, had copies of these tiles in their building, because you find these all over Flint, all over the United States, really. So these are actually a style of tile.
Okay.
Named
Can
after
you say that twice?
A style of tile. Yeah, I'm pretty good at that, actually. So it's named after a village in Italy where they originated. And so 1920s, 1930s, these are really popular with houses, different types of buildings. And there's an artist who approaches Albert Champion, who was the founder of what would eventually become AC Sparkplug, about producing tiles using the kilns used to make spark plugs.
Wait, what's his name again?
Albert Champion.
Is that where AC comes from?
It's AC, Albert Champion.
Wow. I am today years old to find that out.
That's where the name came from.
All right.
Yeah, like I said, the guy's name was Carl Bergmans. He approaches him about this. During the spark plug production process, there were times when the kilns were down. And so the idea was, when the kilns are down, why don't we make these decorative tiles? So that was 1921, and it really got started after that.
Good. Well, Geoff, you used a word called kilns. What exactly is a kiln?
So a kiln is where you are firing tiles, basically. So you're applying a great deal of heat. It hardens the tile, releases any moisture, sort of crystallizes a lot of the materials that are in there. You also have glaze, basically a type of paint or covering that goes over the tile that then hardens and changes colors and things like that. So.
Okay, so there would be times in the factory where the kilns would be down. And so this guy was like, let's just maximize. The kilns are already up, let's just keep them going.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was how it got its start. And these tiles, like I mentioned, are found all over the U.S., all over the city of Flint. At its peak, they had offices in places like San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, really all over the United States. Mm-hmm. So you see them in like elementary schools, factories. They even made their way onto cruise ships. On the wall behind us here, you can see a picture of kind of a nautical scene, and it was from the pool deck of a cruise ship. A lot of these tiles are really plain. You can see on the wall behind me, there's this kind of mint green, pistachio green tile. It's just a plain bathroom tile. We do have a lot of those in the collection. I would say at least a ton, literally a ton of those type of tiles, but a lot of what they were making was decorative. You can see on the table right in front of me here, there's a tile with a lizard on it. They have all kinds of options like that. If you look at one of these faience tile catalogs, they've got all kinds of tiles that have things like animals on them. Sometimes there's like folk tales, children's tales, nursery rhyme, theme, that sort of thing. Some of these, the inspiration comes from like antiquity, like ancient Greece, ancient Rome. So there's all kinds of different things that you can find in their catalog.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm looking at the pistachio colored tile back here, and I would think tile would be more basic, like your bathroom, subway tile, things of that nature. But looking here, I mean, it's pretty detailed. This lizard is really detailed. Yeah.
So in addition to what they offered in the catalogs, you know, they kind of boasted in their advertisements that they can do anything for anybody. And so anything you want, the only limit is your imagination. And they really did that.
Hold on, I gotta give some snaps there. The only limit is your imagination.
Yeah.
Love that.
So one of those things I think you can see behind me here, and that's this tile mosaic. It's called the Tree of Life. And for those of you who are listening, there's a tree with all kinds of animals. There's a sort of pointed arch over the top that to me almost looks like a Middle Eastern influence, but I don't really know for sure. You know, it's very beautiful. You know, it's kind of an interesting story how we discovered this for the History Gallery.
Okay, definitely want to know how did you discover it?
So originally this was moved out of the old Sloan because of course, you know, when we renovated starting in 2018, we had to move the entire collection out. And this tile mosaic was all packed up, wrapped up in foam. I had never seen a picture of it. We didn't have one in the database, didn't really know what it looked like. And so this was 2020. I was the only staff member in my department allowed on site at that time because of the pandemic and everything else. And so we had this identified for inclusion in the History Gallery. So I needed to process it, figure out what it was, all of this stuff. And I spent about 2 hours unwrapping it, putting it together. It was kind of like one of those puzzles you had when you're a kid, when it's just those tiles on a board and all you can do is push them around. It was kind of like that, figuring out how these all fit together.
Yeah, looking at it because they all have smooth edges. So how would you know what? Yeah.
Yeah, and the design is kind of intricate, so it's not necessarily apparent which direction all the tiles are oriented. And it was really rewarding to finally figure out, okay, so this is what this looks like after all. The other challenge with this was figuring out how exactly we were going to display it. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about, or I don't know about passionate, but it's an interest of mine, is mount making.
I would say passionate about.
Okay. You got me. So with mount making, it's like we're trying to find these creative ways to display objects in ways that support them, that don't cause any kind of harm. And so it was really challenging trying to figure out how are we going to display this tile mosaic when we can't use any kind of grout or anything that's going to hold it together. We can't have them sitting on top of each other because they're really heavy and it's going to cause things to break. And so how this is displayed is we have these little brackets that we had somebody make custom for us that are drilled into that board back there. And then they all just rest on it. So you still get that mosaic effect without the tiles resting on top of each other. So it was actually more challenging to come up with than you might think.
Huh. Like you said that they're heavy. About how much you think they weigh each tile?
I would say each one weighs 2 to 3 pounds, and at least. And then when you figure you have a layer of, looks like 8, I mean, that can add up really quickly.
It's absolutely beautiful. You see, it's called the Tree of Life.
The Tree of Life.
It's absolutely beautiful. And it depicts so much about life, too. Yeah. And I love it. How can I get some faience tile?
Well, I mean, there is some still available. A lot of people are selling it. There are artists who are currently making faience style tiles.
Okay.
So it is still possible to find this stuff around,
All right.
for sure. You know, as far as other things that we have in the collection, we do have a decent amount of materials from the company. One of those is something I brought up today. It's a pattern and also a glaze recipe for one of their tiles. So you can see all of the different colors that are going into that, and then some of these, it's the different chemicals that are going into the glaze to get the desired effect. So this, as far as I know, is just an individual tile. But we also have some materials from a mosaic that they put together. And yeah, you can see that there. It doesn't really say where this actually was installed. It just says job number 814. And for those who are listening, it's a woman standing amongst kind of some jungle foliage, it looks like. Yeah, presumably they put together this mosaic somewhere.
The colors are so vivid. It's very nice.
I'd be very curious to see this on the wall somewhere. I think it would be really interesting.
Well, that is job number 814, made right here in the great city of Flint.
Yes, absolutely. So, in 1933, Flint Faience Tile, sadly, actually shut down. So the decision was made by the managers of AC that it was going to be more profitable for them to continue making spark plugs rather than making tiles. Some of the artists transferred to other areas of AC. Some of them went off to other places. I know one of the artists ended up in Milwaukee doing the same kind of thing with tile, but that was the end. But it definitely left a legacy around Flint architecturally. We do have a lot of tiles that came off of buildings in our area. We have a decent number of mosaics and other custom things that they made that are either too heavy or just plain old too fragile to bring up here for the podcast today.
Well, that's very exciting to know that this is another opportunity where the city of Flint made an impact on the world and brought the world to Flint as not just a melting pot of people, but melting pot of styles and ideas and creativity. And so I'm glad to know that, that we have this to be able to look back on and to just learn and glean from, because all of these tiles are amazing to look at.
They are, and it is really yet another example of what Flint brings to the world and has brought historically and continues to bring, really.
I love that part, continues to bring, because we're still making history each and every day. Man, that's amazing. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with us about the Faience tiles?
Yeah, I really love the look of Faience tiles, especially because of the era that they were being made, 1920s, 1930s. A lot of these tiles very much have kind of an Art Deco influence, which I really love. Art Deco. Another art movement called Art Nouveau, that's another one where it's all about those natural forms and shapes. Both of those I find absolutely beautiful. It's my favorite type of material culture style. So the fact that these lean so heavily into that is part of what makes me really like them. So that's really cool.
So Geoff, we talked about, Faience tiles and it's significant to Flint and it's definitely here in our gallery. Like, how can I touch it or how can I be involved with this tile? Because I want to touch it.
A lot of people want to touch things like that, yeah. So we actually do have an interactive, which is right behind you, where people can make their own Faience tile. Yeah, we have a mosaic interactive here, and this is based on an actual tile. There's a photo of it to the left, and people are able to take magnetic tiles and put them onto this grid and make their own Flint Faience tile mosaic.
Well, I'm looking forward to manipulating and creating my own tile. And you heard it again here. We're inviting you to come and join us here at Sloan Museum of Discovery in Flint, Michigan. So if you find yourself here, come on. If you're local or you're just around the world and you find yourself in Flint, come on and check us out. Well, before we wrap up this edition of Uncover Podcast, I wanted to make sure that we have a phone number that you can call or an email address to reach out to us. That phone number is area code 810-237-3417. Again, 810-237-3417. Or you can email us as well at podcast@sloanlongway.org. That's podcast@SLOANLONGWAY.org. I hope you enjoyed this episode talking about Faience tiles and its connection to Flint, Michigan. Have a wonderful day. Right, getting you out of the basement.
Happens every once in a while.
Really?
Yeah. Then they learn their lesson, they send me back down.
Get back down there, you basement dweller.
You had your chance, you messed it up.